All right, I would like to welcome everybody out to our special city council meeting for Wednesday, September 29th, 2021. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance that will be offered to us by Lauren Palmer. If Lauren would please come to the stand, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, we will move straight into the public comment portion of our meeting. Audience members may bring any item to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agenda and minutes, where there is a link to fill out the online public comment form. Your statement will then be read into the public record. We will start, I'm going to turn to our recorder with any electronic that we might have.
One comment received by Paul Thomas. I just wanted to thank you for doing the best for Harriman City. No one is excited about Olympia Hills, but I am glad that you are considering annexation to ensure the city gets some benefit from the development instead of just having all of the associated costs and issues from it. Please continue to educate residents on the benefits of annexation so that people understand how critical it is. Best of luck.
Thank you. With that, we will open up to members in the audience. If there's any members of the public that would like to come and speak at this time, please do so now.
I just wanted to take a quick minute and say thank you for this effort.
State your name.
Oh, sorry, Ryan Button. I just want to thank the mayor, city council, staff for all the time and energy, effort that has gone into making tonight a possibility. 6 months ago, there was an invitation extended to us to explore this process by a couple members of the council and see if this made sense to even consider. I think I can clearly stand here today and tell you that I'm grateful that we took that invitation and we've gone through a process. It's been robust. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been a short process by any means. There's been an incredible amount of meetings. I feel like we live out here, but staff has worked late. We've worked late, and I just can't say thank you enough for that. We also want to recognize that the amount of input that we've received, not only from members of the council, but from staff, from the public, to try and make enhancements to the project. The Olympia will look very different now than it would have in the county because of those enhancements, things like parks and trails and amenities. That the input that we got and the updates that have been made, I don't really look at them as additional requirements. I look at them as enhancements. I really do, and I feel like that's been a benefit of going through this process over the last 6 months. We're excited for Olympia to hopefully become part of the Harriman community. And we look forward to a continued relationship and partnership with the city to help execute the vision that we jointly created over the last 6 months. So with that, I just wanted to again say thank you.
All right, seeing no further public comment, I will close the public comment portion of this meeting. We will move on to item 3.1, discussion and consideration of an ordinance approving an annexation petition for real property located at or near 12600 South, 6800 West, comprising of approximately 933.01 acres into Harriman City, commonly known as the Olympia Land LLC annexation. Jackie.
Mayor and council, thank you. So we started this process back with the notice of intent that was filed in May, and then the petition being filed in June. We certified it in July, and this item has been on 3 different meetings for public hearing where you guys have listened to comments received for it, and now it's back for consideration for this. Just one thing I wanted to note, item 3.1 is the approval for that is contingent upon approval of 3.2 and as well as 3.3. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Oh, thank you. All right, is there any discussion by this body in regards to this annexation?
I want to verify something you just said, Jackie, just to clarify. So approval of this item, still, the language in the ordinance makes it pending approval of other items, right? Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
If there's no further discussion or consideration, I'm happy to accept a motion on this item.
I'm happy to make a motion, Mayor. I will make a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-27, approving an annexation petition filed by Olympia Land LLC, annexing approximately 933 acres of land into Harriman City.
I will second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, we will call for the vote. Jared?
No.
Ed?
Yes.
Sherry?
No?
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, that motion passes. Item 3.2, discussion and consideration of an ordinance approving a master development agreement and applying zoning to approximately 933.01 acres of property located at or near 12600 South, 6800 West to MPC, Large Master Plan Community Zone, for the Olympia development. Chase?
Thank you, Mayor. So this item is related to item 3.1. This is the master development agreement for the Olympia project. Like Jackie identified, this has been going on for quite a while. Started in May. A number of drafts, at least 7, have been sent out to the city council. A number of meetings involving staff and members of city council have gone into reviewing this item, the content therein, and the city council has held 2 public hearings on this item, a number of public outreach, and the Planning Commission has also, by statute, by the requirements of statute, held public hearings on this development agreement, in that it is a land use ordinance, and they have made their recommendation to the city council for approval, as we have identified previously. That being said, the MDA that's being presented to you tonight, we believe as staff, represents the consensus of the majority of the council with regard to this development agreement and the vested rights contained therein, and we are presenting it now for your additional discussion and consideration.
Thank you. Any further discussion in regards to this master development agreement?
Chase, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just mention briefly, since I know that it was an item that was discussed in our last council meeting, but you were able to send an email out to the members of the council today. There would have been I guess, a request, or at least discussion of having this agreement reviewed by basically an independent council, as far as not looking at, obviously, the negotiated points of the master development agreement, but from another set of legal eyes in terms of kind of that unbiased opinion. Could you just make a brief comment to that for the public's, just to be on the public record as far as what that went through and what the feedback was that you received?
Yes. So I took the direction from council at the last meeting, reached out to an attorney who I know well, who's worked with a lot of cities, is currently a contract city attorney, and has worked on a number of complex deals like this. And I sent him the draft development agreement and asked him for just that, for a legal review. He reached out to me, had a lot of questions about the background. It was difficult for him to place that legal analysis sometimes in the context of what the development agreement was trying to accomplish. So we sat down for a number of hours yesterday and went over some of that background, reviewed the legal aspects of the agreement, and it was his opinion that there was not anything that he would change with regard to the legal components of the development agreement.
Thank you. Any further discussion regarding this item?
I just have some generalized comments, and I don't know, Mayor, if you want to take those before or potentially after a motion and a vote on this item, but I just have some Nothing that is substantive towards, obviously, any changes in what is being proposed, but just some generalized comments towards the process.
So I intend to allow all members, once we are done with all of these items, to take a moment to make any comments regarding their votes after item 3.3. So if you're comfortable waiting until then, we can do that then, but I'll give all
Absolutely,
members
not
of
a
this
problem.
body an opportunity to make any comments that they would like to in regards to these items. If there's no further discussion, I will be willing to accept the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-28, vesting certain development rights and approving the execution of a master development agreement and accepting portions of the master development agreement as municipal land use ordinances for the Olympia development, authorizing a zoning map amendment and assigning the Olympia MPC zone to approximately 933 acres of land known as Olympia, located at approximately 126 South, 6800 West.
Mr. Mayor, I will second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? If not, I will call for a vote. Clint?
Yes.
Sherry? No. Steve?
Yes.
Jared?
No.
And I will vote yes, that motion passes. We'll move on to item 3.3, discussion consideration of a resolution approving a petition to create one or more of the public infrastructure districts and authorizing the execution of the public infrastructure district governing documents for the purpose for the proposed Olympia development. Chase.
Thank you, Mayor. So this item, like the previous two, is related to the Olympia development. One of the provisions of the development agreement allows for public financing through the use of public infrastructure districts. That needs to be approved separate from that item in that the council, as the approving authority for the governing, or for the public infrastructure districts, would need to approve that by resolution. Part of that approval would also be approving the governing document, which is the document that dictates how those boards are to be run, what type of financing they can engage in, and the nature and the operation, as well as the termination of those districts once they've completed their services. I've presented on this at a few meetings. We've also had our outside bond counsel present and discuss this with the council. I'm happy to answer any questions, though nothing has changed since the last time that we have discussed this item.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this item?
I'll just make again a comment specific to this item here that again I think through a good robust process has already been mentioned that again we were able to be innovative and think a little bit outside of the box in how a public or a PID can be used in this instance, and again I think that's just goes to show what a good robust process can do and how innovative ways can be applied without having, while addressing, I should say, some of the concerns that I think this body has expressed over PIDs in the past. But I think that, again, supportive of it, but I appreciate the work that has gone in to getting us where we're at on this particular item.
Yeah, to your point, Clint, I think, especially related to item 3.3 here, we verified with the bond company and others that this will be the first PID in the state of Utah to use a contract fee for repayment instead of a mill levy or a tax on the residents. And so we felt like that's a big win in terms of how this is going to be paid for and truly represents a unique solution to how it's going to be paid for. So I'm pretty excited about that part of it. That's really good.
Agreed.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll accept a motion on this item.
Mr. Mayor, we'll make a motion on item 3.3, motion to approve resolution R16-2021, approving the creation of the Olympia Public Infrastructure Districts number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, authorizing and approving the governing document, interlocal agreement, and approval of the annexation area, and appointing the Board of Trustees as depicted in the resolution.
I will second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? I will call for a vote. Sherry?
No.
Steve?
Yes.
Jared?
No.
Clint?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. That motion passes. As I stated earlier, I am going to allow each member of the council an opportunity to speak towards any of these items or their decisions as they'd wish. So we will start and just go down the line. We'll start with Steve. If you have any comments you would like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This has been a exhausting process. It has been, I know personally for me, into the hundreds of hours. And I know if that's multiplied over all the staff and everybody else, we're into the thousands and thousands of man hours of work into this process. As we started the process, I was eager to have discussions and get information and explore ideas with a certain reluctance, understanding that I still believe it was better for us to engage in communication and discussion as opposed to opposition. I still was skeptical of the process, where we could get to and whether or not we could actually accomplish some of the things we wanted. As the first drafts of an MDA started to come out, or even before that, we recognized early on a list of problems that we had identified in other master development agreements that had been signed throughout the history of our city. And without laying blame on anyone, there were a lot of shortcomings and problems that we wanted to correct in those previous agreements. And early on in the very first drafts, we identified and corrected almost all of those. Further drafts down the road corrected all of those issues. Some question has been why it's better for us to have this property annexed into the city of Harriman as opposed to allowing it to develop outside the city of Harriman. Maybe I should ask that question a different way. Is there a benefit to the city of Harriman through annexation as opposed to not annexation? Our vote doesn't really determine whether or not the development is going to go forward or not. So I wrote down some highlights that I pulled out of the master development agreement that I just wanted to put on record, for public review of some of the things that I thought were important adds and additions to this development agreement that had been absent from previous agreements or had been modified in this agreement. As this application goes forward, or as the development goes forward, each individual plat or subdivision of the development as it's applied to be approved, the developer is required to submit a development report along with each and every subdivision or plat application. And that development report has to contain a few things, and I'll identify those as we go on here. But specifically the type of units, acres, amount of open space, number of units remaining in the MDA, really just an accounting of where this particular application would fall into the grand scope of the MDA. As part of those development reports, there's a requirement to submit a letter from a traffic engineer certifying that the development proposed by that particular application substantially complies with the assumptions and projections of the traffic impact study. This letter will certify that the proposed road infrastructure will supply a level of service of D or better. That's an important number. Below D is when we have bad traffic jams in some places. D is still flowing traffic. If the engineer's letter indicates that the units, development phase, or aspects of the application do not comply with the traffic impact study or otherwise cause greater impacts than the traffic impact study indicated, then a completely new traffic impact study must be completed at the developer's cost, and the developer then would be responsible for paying their portion of the additional impact created by their changes. Additionally, the city does have the right to withhold building permits and approvals until such remedies are completed. Each development application also will be required to provide verification of continued availability of water, sewer, stormwater, fire, and other utilities. The city is not obligated to issue any building permits in the absence of these verifications. I wouldn't want to suggest that that's a completely new clause. That's a pretty standard clause, but I think it's important to bring that to the public's attention. Secondary water is going to be installed in the project. Open space must be developed at the same rate as the residential units are developed. For example, if the development has built out 25% of the units, then approximately 25% of the open space must also be installed and improved. At no time can this fall behind by more than 10% or building permits stop. The way the open space is designed, every housing unit in the development will be located within 1/2 mile of a 2-acre or larger park or open space. In this particular agreement, open space will exclude what I'm going to call some of the silly things that had been included in other MDAs like parking strips, rooftop gardens, that type of thing. The developer will construct at their expense numerous public parks and dedicate to the city parks over 2 acres in size and the trails. So they're going to pay for the development and then dedicate all of the property to the city. A special agreement was reached to construct a 14-acre park in conjunction with the Hidden Oak subdivision directly south of Olympia Hills, with approximately 7 acres on each side of the border, 7 acres in Olympia Hills, 7 acres in Hidden Oaks. Our Parks Department is going to be working with the construction of that park with local sports organizations to help design and locate permanent facilities and improvements for local sports to practice and hold competitions on this property. This agreement requires a 4-year review where both parties are required to sit down and discuss the development, general economy, city conditions, and other issues related to the plan and ways to remedy issues that may have arisen during that time. None of our other development agreements have any requirement whatsoever to revisit any issues. This is not a requirement to make changes, but it at least is a requirement to meet on a regular basis to discuss how things are going. In part of our process, 2 independent commercial real estate brokers, actually 3, but 2 independent commercial real estate brokers were consulted, one on behalf of the city, one on behalf of the developer, and each source independently came back with a total feasible amount of commercial space of approximately 200,000 square feet inside the development. The city was able to negotiate 300,000 square feet minimum commercial space and the holding of at least 10 acres of land for commercial uses for up to 25 years. These numbers are minimum levels, not maximums, and the city will be actively involved working with professional retail recruitment firms and other economic development resources to increase the commercial in and around Olympia Hills. Extra incentive was given for the development of an employment center with at least 150 on-site jobs and/or a performing arts center or other substantial civic use. Police and fire are excluded from this calculation. Commercial development will be distributed throughout development nodes around the project, meaning there will be commercial elements in each of the several town center and village center aspects of this project. One thing that I think is really important to our taxpayers and to the residents of Harriman is that the developer is responsible for 100% of the infrastructure inside the development. Roads, park strips, trees, landscaping, sidewalks, trails, water pipes, stormwater management systems, etc. The city's only cost will be paying for upsizing of water lines or other amenities inside the project. In our past MDAs, the city has agreed to reimburse developers using impact fees, but as we have identified over and over and over and over and over again, impact fees are rarely enough to pay for the cost of all of those infrastructure developments. And in many of those agreements, the city has agreed to be the backstop for those impact fee shortages, which has really cost us a lot of money out of general fund to meet some of those obligations. In this case, that will not happen. Design standards have been increased substantially and more fully developed than were in the previous iteration approved in the county. For example, this is something I think a lot of our residents would be, probably didn't jump out at them, but I think is something that's going to be a big benefit, is that some of the open space and parks are going to serve as stormwater detention basins. And in a lot of our other developments, or many of our other developments around the city, those stormwater detention basins are so full of water so often that the landscaping becomes, if there is any landscaping, it becomes muddy, sometimes a hazard for kids to be playing around and in. In this development, in an effort to keep these open spaces usable at almost all times, large facilities are going to be constructed to hold stormwater underground for most storms. Only those storms that are in the 85th percentile or greater will ever have stormwater above ground on those fields. And then it'll only be on there long enough for it to flow out to the below ground facilities. This will allow for the landscaping to remain in place and usable year round. There are many, 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 many other advantages and enhancements that have been made as part of this development agreement that did not exist in the county's version, nor have existed in any prior development agreement inside the city of Harriman. So as it relates to specifically the development agreement and design standards, I think we've done very well. I think that the residents want to understand the financial impacts of this. Is this a good thing or a bad thing for the city? Is it a win or a loss? The current forecasts, the last forecast we had, suggested that the city would obtain approximately $35 million in building building permits. A portion of that money will be used for, of course, inspections and all of the things associated with the building, and a portion of that money will be going into the general fund of the city. Additionally, the question is, how much will it cost the city on an ongoing basis to provide services out there? And the current financial analysis suggests that there will be approximately $3 million per year in revenues in excess of the cost needed to provide services, therefore becoming the first development inside the city of Harriman to actually pay for itself. I don't want to continue to monopolize the time or go too long or keep anybody here longer than they want to, but I felt it was important to go on record as to all of the wins and the things that I think are good reasons for us to be annexing this property and moving forward with the development of Olympia Hills inside the boundaries of Harriman City.
Thank you, Steve. We'll move on to Jared. Do you have any comments you'd like to make at this time? Jared, are you still with us?
Sorry, I'm driving. If you could come back to me.
Okay. Sherry.
I don't have a lot to say. I said most of what I wanted to say last week. With not intending to be argumentative, I'm not going to go down that path. I simply disagree. I would have voted yes on the annexation. I would have voted yes on the PID because I think that those are really positive things for our community. I would thank immensely our staff and all the people who've worked diligently. There's people on both sides of this that have worked very hard to negotiate and come to meetings and things like that to work through these details. So I would pass along my thank you to all those who've put in the time and effort for that. I just have a very differing view of this. I believe that I was at the league meeting today. I spoke with decision makers from all of the cities that touch us, and all of them were shocked that we didn't negotiate down the density. Shocked. A state senator called out Harriman saying, You guys have way too much of that type of development in your community. So I don't think that I am argumentative or put myself in a position of opposing and being obstructive for this type of thing. I simply believe that I'm just doing my job of representing the people in my area that say it's too dense. This is 70-30, basically, multifamily versus single-family housing on the very farthest southwest corner you can possibly go. And I just personally think it's irresponsible to do that. I think it drives up the cost. We have no provision in this MDA that mandates any kind of affordability. We have a lot of density, but no affordable housing here to speak of. It's concerning to me. So it's been unfortunate. I would have loved to have been had more meetings about the MDA. I personally have been able to meet with this body, this decision-making body, for 2 work meetings on the MDA. We had one that the developers came, and we had one that just the council was there. That's all. We can talk about the hours and hours of meetings and things like that, but literally that's all. And so to me, it's just premature. I believe that we could have continued to work out this. I was told lots of things. If you would agree to make a unanimous decision, we can work on the density. I'm not going to do that because I can only do it if it meets my conscience, and this does not. I worked really hard with the county representatives to say no to this. Again, not because I think it's not going to develop, not because I think that there's bad eggs in any of this, just simply because I don't think that it meets the needs of the area. I think that we have already really, really high transportation costs for our residents in this area. And I'm just not seeing great plans of reducing that. So again, affordability continues to be a problem and a concern. I'm grateful for the PID. I'm grateful that that was designed that way so that they don't have additional taxes on top of that. They will have additional water expense. There's just a lot of things that I think will compound to make it more difficult for them to have affordability. So I can't support that. And those are just the reasons. I applaud the other people again. Thank you for working on this, and thank you for putting all the efforts that you have into this, but I just simply can't support it for those reasons.
Thank you. Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I don't want to belabor a lot of the points that have already been made, but I do, have just a few of my thoughts that I wanted to make sure that I shared with this body and the public tonight. As was mentioned, this all started with an invitation to the developer to come and sit down with Herman City and to at least have an exploratory conversation. And I'll be honest, having been one of those first people to extend that invitation, I did not think that it would be accepted or received well based on the history that had existed with the Olympia development and how it moved through the county's approval process, and obviously the public reaction to that initial process, and a lot of that reaction obviously from members of Herman and also Herman City itself. So I will just start by saying that I am very appreciative of the developers' professionalism to respectfully accept that invitation to at least sit down. And that was the start of, again, what has been described as, and I agree with, a very robust process over the last 6 months. And Councilman Shields already outlined a lot of the things that have been put into the MDA, a lot of the changes that have been made to the MDA, and I think a lot of the benefits that are in there that have come as a result of that robust process. But I will tell you, and forgive me for taking just a minute, none of that process and those things would have happened without the immense amount of time spent by a number of people And it goes without saying for the developer and those on his team that have been part of that. But in particular, I want to just mention some of the efforts of our staff that have helped make what we have come to tonight very possible. I'll start with, again, I'll try and move through these quickly, but Wendy was the interim city manager when this all started. She was put into a very difficult position, not only just with the circumstances around the city, but now a very difficult issue, to be quite honest with you, on, again, the history that had existed and now engaging in this conversation and this possible discussion of annexation. And she led us admirably through the start of that process. And then, of course, then you have Nathan, our city manager, who was thrown into the middle of this. And you want to talk about drinking from a fire hose. Nathan, I again applaud the way that you approached this, the professionalism that you displayed in helping us as elected officials and all of staff through the process. Again, in the middle of a very difficult process, but one that you did not shy away from at all. And I appreciate your leadership in that respect. Communications, let's talk about that just for a second. Tammy and the whole communications team has taken on a very heavy load, because one of the things that we talked about at the onset of this process is that we wanted it to be very open. We wanted it to be transparent. We wanted it to be robust, and it has been all of those things. If I can just briefly mention a couple of highlights. This report was published by our communications team, specifically about the communications efforts during the annexation process. It's available on the website if you haven't had to see it, but just a couple of highlights here that I think are astounding when you talk about the effort that has been put in here and the opportunity for public input. Initially, 15,500 mailers went out to every household within Herman City in August, talking about the annexation and the possibilities therewith. There was a web page on the Herman City's landing site dedicated specifically to all things Olympia and all of the meetings. Again, please review this report. You'll be astounded of the amount of work that has gone into it. And again, that'll give you a sense of the burden that we put on our workforce in the midst of them trying to do all of the normal day-to-day things. But that landing page had the summaries of 23 work meetings. All of the several iterations of draft MDAs, design standards, road plans, active transportation plans, land use plans, the annexation process timeline, all of the things that go in there is astounding of, again, the work that we requested of them. There were almost 7,000 notices mailed out to the communities for the community meetings. Almost 2,500 in communities 2 and 3 for the first meeting, and almost 4,500 for meeting number 2 in communities 1 and 4. Again, all of that in an effort to keep our residents informed, allow opportunity to hear and to provide input, which a lot of our members gratefully took advantage of. And then obviously the public comment and hearing processes that we went through here in the city, both at the Planning Commission and here at the City Council level, again, providing those opportunities for impact or for input. And again, all of that done to help coordinate and push out that information through our communications team. So Tammy, to you and your team, thank you very much. Our community development team, Blake, Michael, Jonathan, and beyond, the planning meetings and the level of detail and design standards, road cross sections, storm drains. This is stuff that will put you to sleep at night. Trust me, it did me many nights trying to get through it. But the level of detail and professionalism and expertise by our staff in making sure that we, as the elected officials, try to incorporate all of these needs into the design standards and master development agreement. I'm amazed at the amount of expertise of you and your staff. Alan, your financial analysis of that have been spot on throughout the entire process. And I know you take a lot of pride in that, and that's why we can always count on your efforts to be thorough in that as well. And lastly, I will say that, Chase, I am very glad that we pay you salary and not hourly. Because the amount of work, he's not near as lucky as Bruce is in the back, who does, I think, get paid hourly. But the amount of work, again, on the technical and expertise of the legal piece of this that Chase has brought to the table and to this city has been astounding. And the trying to keep up with, of course, the scatterbrained thoughts and discussions that can take place from myself and others throughout this process. Thank you for your efforts in keeping us straight. But all of that is said to say that this was an immense team effort, not only amongst your elected officials. There's no doubt that I would love to have seen this been a unanimous decision amongst the council. It's a difficult issue. If it wasn't a difficult issue, we wouldn't have put in the effort that we did, and it would have been a simple vote for everybody to be on board. And I respect those decisions that don't agree with some aspects of it. That is part of the government, and that's what's great about our form of government and how we work. But at the end of the day, again, there are items that we could continue to debate, honestly, forever with no consensus and no resolution, and that centers around density. We can have that debate all day long, and I don't know that we will ever all come to an agreement on that. Another big topic of debate throughout this was the commercial and retail square footage and how much and where. And again, I think that can continue to be debated. But what I do know, having served in the city for many years now, is that both of those things, density and commercial square footage, and a lot of other things will continue to change drastically as time progresses, as the economies change, as market changes drive different changes within how we develop. And this, even though I think we have a great plan, starting plan today, will change over time. It will have to be agile over time to keep up, again, with those changing economies. I saw a report today that talked about the median home price in Salt Lake has went up another 26% over the last year to now over $455,000 for the median home price. And I think to myself, how in the world will our children be able to survive if these types of trends continue in the future? And again, whether you agree with and whatever your definition of high density housing is, what I do know is that we need all types of housing available in our community in order to give everyone an opportunity to be part of our community. And I hope that that means my children, as they grow and move into that phase of their life, and I hope it's something that there's available to them to be able to live here if they choose so, and that they can afford regardless of where they're at in their own career path, starting out or experienced. I think we have done a lot of great work. Again, Councilman Shields highlighted a lot of positives that I think come out of the process. And one of those that I just wanted to highlight is our parks, trails, and open space. And I think the planning that has went into that, again, some of the changes that have been made to the larger parks, those that will be dedicated to the city, the regional connectivity of the trails through this development. And again, if you didn't catch that regional connectivity, this will connect to existing in Harriman, as well as South Jordan and with the county. This is a regional effort, and this will be a benefit to not only those that live within Harriman and within the Olympia development, which will be part of Harriman, but to all of those in the surrounding communities. We will have the most robust trail system around that will just, again, I'm excited for the development down the road. I hope I'm around long enough to really see this develop out, because some of the stuff at the far west of this proposed development will be pretty spectacular once it gets done. Lastly, again, I just, again, want to say thanks to the developer, to the whole team, that is to everybody in your approach, the professionalism that you've displayed. Again, it hasn't been an easy process. There certainly has been some challenging and difficult conversations, ones that I think are easy to kind of elevate feelings and tempers at times based on our own opinions, but they remained very professional through the entire process and allowed this process the opportunity to work and to be successful. And I'm happy to be here tonight saying that I'm confident that this is a successful iteration of all of that many hours, thousands of hours of work that has gone into it and will be a benefit for our community for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councilman Henderson, you're up.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
So I'll start out kind of the same way most everybody else did, thanking everyone for their hard work. Our staff has definitely worked very hard at the direction of the majority of this council. My critique tonight and in any previous meetings is not of anyone but this body, myself included, and no one else. My view is that this is a gigantic opportunity missed to make a meaningful reduction on the negative impacts that Olympia Hills will have on our residents. The MDA that has been negotiated is good in a lot of respects and is definitely better than others that Harriman has approved in the past. But that's an irrelevant comparison. The only comparison in this case that matters is comparing it to the county MDA and the net result on Harriman residents of whether we do this within Harriman or it's developed through that county MDA. And really, there are only two. I outlined those last week in the meeting, that some of the road improvements will be done up front versus us having to be reimbursed for them from the county, and that some of the parks will hopefully be built in a little bit better proportion as building continues. I mean, other than that, the net result in regards to the county MDA is pretty much negligible. I think we all knew that Olympia Hills would consider annexing to Harriman when approached, as it's greatly beneficial to them, and I totally support that effort and have supported it, as we should be able to negotiate a lower density and therefore a better net result on the quality of life for our residents. However, what I vehemently disagree with is that instead of focusing on proper civic planning and reducing the negative effects that the density the county awarded in that agreement, this effort was based almost entirely on the false premise of a financial windfall for the city, and the time frame was driven by the municipal election. Consequently, this effort set down the path of a political decision versus one focused on proper planning. Rather than the open public meetings and dialogue that were promised, the vast majority of meetings and discussions were behind closed doors, and only the information in favor of the annexation was communicated to the public. In my opinion, this is a huge step backwards, not just a mistake, it's a permanent mistake, one that will irreparably harm not only Harriman residents, but the residents of those cities that surround us, and prior to this time that we've been working and making such progress with. What I hope that we can do from this is, now that it's over, we can move on to other business and work in a better light. It was mentioned early on in this process that if the residents don't like what we do, that they can vote us out, and I hope that they remember that come election time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Henderson. I will take the privilege of getting to speak last and extending out Bruce's payment for as long as possible. I do have a couple thoughts real quick before we adjourn here. First, I'm not sure the developer will ever forgive me for standing next to Mayor McAdams when he vetoed this original approval by the county. That was 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago, in which that happened. And at that time, I vehemently opposed the approval. I stood there, and I stood right there on the news, right next to Mayor McAdams when he had his press conference, and vetoed that at the county level. Obviously, things have changed since then. A lot has come, a lot has gone, and we've done a lot to make changes. The county at that point reapproved that in a way that could not be overruled or that was not vetoed by the county mayor. And it put us in a different situation. And like has been said, we started over with what we had. In all honesty, I think there's a couple of things that are really important. One of the frustrations that I had was that I felt like our community had been left out and hadn't been considered and hadn't been part of those conversations. While yes, there was an approval in place, when we reached out back at the beginning of this year and started having those conversations, there was a genuine good faith effort made by all parties involved on both sides, both from the city standpoint and from the developer, to try to find something that works for everyone. And I think that's important to call out that, in my opinion, throughout this entire process, since we, over the last year, I have not seen something that I've felt, at least from the developer, has been anything other than working in that good faith manner. Sure, there's things that they're going to try to get, and there's things we're going to try to get, and it's a negotiation, and those things happen. But it was not in any way anything other than above board, in my opinion, as far as the developer is concerned. I hope that one day they'll forgive me for fighting them for years, but that may never happen, and that's okay. I do appreciate Councilman Henderson for calling out the fact that this is a decision that was made by this council. This was not a decision made by staff. I own my decision. I voted yes for this, and I will continue to own that for moving forward. This council owns the decision that they have approved this at this point. Staff has done all that has been asked of them and more. And frankly, I believe that any attempt at this point to blame staff or to accuse staff of doing anything other than what has been asked would be disingenuous and in my opinion, frankly, dishonest. I appreciate that I haven't heard that from any members of this body, but I would also direct that to our community as well, that our staff has worked tirelessly and effortlessly to do to work in the direction that they have been given by this body, whether or not they agree or disagree with the path that has been taken. They have moved forward and have worked with that integrity. I personally would defend any member of staff and the actions they have taken. To my knowledge, they have done their best to do their work with that honesty and integrity, and I will defend them in that process. To the best of my knowledge, they have done just that. While no agreement or development is perfect, I am confident that we've reached a place that, based on the circumstances that we found ourselves in a year ago, that is a better opportunity, and that will help Harriman be a place that will continue to grow and to continue to be one of the premier communities in the West. I hear often about that the city of Harriman is the place when people come to move out here, this is where they look. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate that this, in my opinion, this development agreement and this annexation will continue to do that, as well as keeping the city financially stable well into the future. If there's only a few things that I do in my time here and the time that I have left as mayor, helping the city become financially stable is absolutely one of the most important that I will do. When I stood next to Mayor McAdams years ago, I lived on the other side of town, about as far away from this project as you could. I've since moved, and now I live literally next door. My house is on all of the maps that we've seen. My property is located on that. I will be directly affected, just like all of the other residents that live next door. I own that, and I will own that to my neighbors in my community and to my residents. But I am confident that we sit better today than we did a year ago. So with that, I would express my appreciation to staff, once again to Wendy, to Nathan, to Alan, and to Chase for their excellent work and doing what we've asked you to do, whether or not we've been clear entirely as we've been doing it. I'd like to thank the developer and the landowners for the effort that they've put in to make this a project that we can work together on. And I look forward to the first day that we get to open one of the parks and standing next to you to open those first parks and create those amenities for our community. This is a project that will last 30 years. I hope to still be here in 30 years, but my kids definitely will be. And I hope that time will judge me in a way that shows that we did something right by our community, and that the 6,000 families that move into our community based on this project will feel the same way as well. And with that, brings us to the end of our meeting. I do want to call out real quick that we do have the Fallen Firefighter Memorial scheduled for Saturday. So for those of you who would be interested in attending, please, that is our public servants are important individuals, and we want to make sure we recognize those that have fallen. That will be at 10 o'clock at City Hall on Saturday. With that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.